In this 5-minute episode, I'm talking with a corporate cybersecurity professional with experience in IT networks, information security analysis, compliance and cloud security architecture. A former full-time then part-time instructor at NAIT and now cybersecurity advisor to C-suite in one of Canada's largest corporations. He's worked for government, retail, utilities, health and education, and he's presented Let's Make Fun of Cybersecurity last year at B-Sides Edmonton, which is where I met him for the first time. Congratulations, Prashant, on gaining SANS Global Industrial Cybersecurity Professional Certification after 4 months of rigorous training. That's quite an achievement, and shows that even experienced professionals still value these kinds of micro-credentials when they're already embedded in a career in cybersecurity. At one time, you were looking at a PhD in quantum computing and digital signatures and presented at the ICE conference back in 2009. Can you tell me a bit about the thesis, a little bit about your PhD?
Okay, thank you, Alex, first of all, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this mini podcast series. Any expressions or opinions I'll be giving are of my own and not of my employer or any professional organization I'm entitled to. Thank you for congratulating me on the SANS GICSP certification. It is definitely an achievement I have been hoping for the past couple of months after a lot of training on this. And it's a certification which, for all reasons, even having experience in this industry is something I think is very important to have. Yeah, with regards to your question around my PhD in quantum computing and digital signatures, it is a very important field and something I always liked during my career in the past. In fact, when I was in my college and university days, I wanted to see if there is a field which could marry physics with computer science, as I've always been an enthusiast of physics. And this was the field that actually married quantum mechanics with computer science and always intrigued me. Research has always been close to my heart and I always like to talk about in various conferences.
Now, I didn't send you these questions a week ago like I did for Maxwell Abayabasi. And as I know you're familiar with and have an opinion on these technologies that I've got down here in this list, if you can give me on a scale of 1 to 5 how important you feel these technologies are to an organization, and we'll start with SIM, Security Information and Event Management.
Yes, so SIM or SIM as we call it as different acronyms for this technology, but it in my opinion is a very important one. In the scale of 1 to 5, I would definitely give it a 4 for sure, if 5 is the highest, because it is all about visibility and you can't monitor or safeguard things what you don't know. Right. So SIEM as in terms of its log analytics platform or capabilities and its correlation capabilities is very important. So it's all about visibility and making sure we have that on our network, on our servers to be able to do that. I do see SOAR there and generative AI, deep fake videos and audio jacking. And so SOAR in my opinion would be 4 as well. Because it's all about automation and orchestration these days. There is so much proliferation of cybersecurity technologies in the industry now that it is important that we find avenues to automate and orchestrate many of these in playbooks or analyst playbooks, and SOAR is definitely a technology which can bring in various other technologies to give you a view of how to do incident response or SOC duties in it. Right. So definitely it's up in the game, almost similar to SIEM as 4.
Now, a statistic I heard of a couple of years ago, 2022 I think it was, that hackers, cyber criminals had become 94% more effective in that year. And I think it's a scary statistic because many corporate organizations will not have got anywhere near becoming 94% more efficient in their SOC duties.
Absolutely, and just to add on to that, it's the dictum in the world is do more with less, and we don't have enough skill set or resources to spare and throw human resources on these problems. So you got to make sure and find ways how to use technology to automate these things, and definitely SIEM and SOAR definitely come in that bucket list of technologies.
And then we have endpoint detection and response.
Yes.
On devices such as cell phones, Windows laptops, Macs, etc.
Absolutely. So endpoint detection and response, by the way, is actually a evolution of what we used to call antivirus in our old days of the past, and now it has become more of a technology at the endpoint control, which is important, and I would give it a rating of, I would say 4 as well, because EDR technologies, the way I see cybersecurity controls is you can actually do controls either on the perimeter or on the network, or you could do it on the endpoints. And on the endpoints, which is the last line of defense, if you see defense in depth strategy, is the last line. I mean, and EDR is what basically saves your bacon at the end of the day if everything else fails between a hacker and to the endpoint, which is a critical asset if you're trying to safeguard. So EDR is an important one, and I would say that would be a 4 as well.
Right, thank you. So if a attacker is within your network and they breached your network, preventing them from going laterally and exfiltrating your company's data is very important with NDR.
Absolutely. So a network detection and response is another piece where the disclosure of information out, as you just talked about, command and control servers of these big hackers or threat actors needs to be disrupted in case the endpoint has been breached, to make sure that the network level defenses take over as well. So, but having said that, I don't have a lot of experience on the NDR technologies, to be honest with you. I would give it a 3 in my opinion.
Okay. Now, within the network, NDR and EDR are crucial. How about a cyber criminal's temptation on your organization? When they look at your organization from the outside and look at the perimeter, assuming it hasn't been breached yet, called attack surface management, how would you rate that on a scale of 1 to 5?
Yeah, so ASM technologies, or attack surface management, as you talked about, is, in my opinion, a budding up and coming and budding field where certainly, the exposure you have is where you could be attacked, and these are the inputs or threat vectors through which bad actors can actually come into your organization. Whether you have exposure to the internet, whether you have exposure to bad actors physically or otherwise, are considered to be the attack surfaces of your organization. Having said that, I would give it a 3 because it is still an upcoming field. We got to see where it matures into. When I talked about SIEM and SOAR, those are core technologies and the visibility. I'm of the opinion, Alex, that basically that you can't prevent everything from happening. The world has moved on from prevention of cyber attacks to defending. So you got to assume that you have been attacked or breached, and what can you do to defend to make sure that you continue to run your operations.
Right.
So in that way, ASM, in my opinion, would be more of a identify/prevent type of concept, while SIEM, SOAR, and EDRs are more defensive capabilities. So I would give them a little bit more rating than ASM.
Okay. Now, there's a term which I'm not sure is familiar to most people in cybersecurity yet, and maybe it's also a new technology like ASM. It's UAX, Unified Analyst Experience. So when we have less resources or we have trouble retaining and keeping hold of our people inside the organization, having a unified experience where one person can look at a single open platform potentially without having to do swivel chair to look at a number of different tools. How important do you think that is within an organization these days?
So as you just said, honestly, this would be a new term for me and in understanding what UAX actually means, but I can absolutely appreciate the concept and the understanding that it is basically centralizing in one single pane of glass these myriad of technologies and giving the analyst that that information and that wisdom to act upon those things. So in my opinion, I would still, if it is a technology coming up and budding, I would give it a 4, because this is important, and this is a long-lasting problem in cybersecurity, as in other fields, that single pane of glass view is very hard to come, and we have become so complex in our way of doing things that we have probably lost the objective of figuring out how to keep things simple and making sure that we do the right things with the right priorities in mind. So yeah, UX, in my opinion, would still be a 4. Yeah.
Okay, so GRC tools, they're not necessarily cybersecurity tools, but they help an organization do auditing and reporting to regulators and stakeholders. Now, if you're a government, then you might be setting a regulation, or you might be adhering to your own regulation. If you're a corporation, you may be reporting to stakeholders in an annual report, or giving some kind of breach response potentially to having been a breach recently. How important would you see GRC tools as within a corporate space?
Absolutely. So GRC, as you just mentioned, governance, risk, and compliance. In my opinion, I'll give it a 3, and the reason I would put forth is, first of all, I'm a geek at heart, so I'm more like a guy who likes more security technically on the ground, and GRC tools, in my opinion, are more after the fact, once breaches happen or you comply with certain regulations or you're asked to comply with certain regulations. I mean, in a nutshell, I do some teaching as well, as you mentioned before, in NAIT and Concordia University of Edmonton. The philosophy I adhere to is security is not compliance. Compliance is an after effect or is an outcome if you do security right. So securing things is more important. Complying to them definitely is important from a regulation standpoint, but that should be an outcome. So GRC tools would be a 3 in my opinion, but they are important because regulation is also the bane of existence, and many corporations in the industry right now need to comply, or else they will be levied heavy fines by the regulators for that matter. And but end of the day, as I mentioned before, if we do security right, with basics in mind, then I think we should be able to comply easily with various regulations in the industry.
Right. The GRC tools make it easier to audit your obligations or findings of an investigation. Now, how about third parties? An organization can't always do things themselves. This is not a loaded question. Third parties can help you with threat management and advise you on threat intelligence. They can often have a huge wealth of information at their disposal that they share across multiple clients in order to be able to provide the best advice to a single corporation. How important do you think third parties are to the cybersecurity strategy in general?
Absolutely. So third parties are important by all means, and I will give them a 4 as well, because it is important to know that you need to augment your skill set and your workforce as an organization with these third-party companies, whether they are MSPs, managed service providers, or managed security providers, or other companies who provide security consulting and whatnot. For the simple reason, many of the corporations in the industry, their bane of existence or their main job is not cybersecurity or IT for that matter. Their main job is to, deliver energy or deliver healthcare or be a public safety or public, to the public, let's say, in the government sector. So that's their main job and main role. And cybersecurity is an outcome or is an enabler to that in the industry or in TIS or in IT functions. So many of these organizations, obviously for budget constraints and whatnot, cannot have a full-fledged cybersecurity workforce to work for them. So they need to augment that staff, that capability with these third parties who are not just bringing in the human resource and the skill set, but also the intelligence, also the real-world scenarios. Also, these organizations have lived many of these war stories and incidents in other organizations. So they bring that best practice to help out with these engagements with these clients in the corporate world. And hence it is pretty important to have good relationships, maybe have incident response retainers with these third parties, consulting engagements with them, whether from an audit and compliance standpoint or from a security standpoint for that matter.
I'm undecided about cyber insurance. If you can get cyber insurance and you can tick all the boxes, then you're probably doing a good job already, and therefore maybe you don't need the cyber insurance. And how much do you spend on getting a certain amount of coverage? And how do you even begin to assess the liabilities of an organization to determine what's the right level of cyber insurance and whether you can even afford it and whether it's worthwhile insuring yourself?
Yeah, so it's definitely a good question I have struggled with as well in my professional career, to understand the existence of cyber insurance and how it can help mitigate some of those risks in the industry. So one is from a foundational standpoint, if you look at risk management, cyber insurance is actually about risk transfer. And what you're doing is you're transferring risk from your own organization to a third party if they can take on and insure you for the practices you have inbuilt in your organization. The other thing I've seen in the insurance industry for that matter is that it is evidence-based. And in the industry, corporate world, or otherwise in cybersecurity, we are still nascent enough in the cyber insurance world that there's not enough evidence which has yet been collected for the cyber insurers to actually insure you, let's say as an industry in oil and gas, as an industry in energy, as an industry in healthcare, or as an industry in the government for that matter. So I would give cyber insurance a 3 at this point in time, but having said that, it is important. I mean, for small businesses, to be honest, who don't have the wherewithal to have a big, large cybersecurity teams to support them, this would probably be a good opportunity to look at cyber insurance to cover their losses for that matter. For big companies, they may still have a wherewithal to contain and continue doing their own cybersecurity, and may have to have a second look whether they need cyber insurance or not.
I imagine the larger the company, the more expensive it's likely to be as well until it becomes prohibitive.
Absolutely.
So cyber resilience then, after a company has been breached and they need to maybe they've had some data stolen, maybe they've been ransomed and they just shut their systems down, being able to recover from a data breach or from a data theft, being able to have protected client information, client data, privacy data, how important do you think cyber resiliency is as part of business continuity planning, or BCP?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, Alex, and I actually welcome this particular topic on cyber resilience because it's very close to my heart. In fact, a couple of talks I've given in the industry in the OT cyberspace around consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering, as an example, relate to cyber resilience as a concept. So the way I understand cyber resilience, or resilience for that matter, is it's four-legged stool. Even if you take out one leg, with three legs you can still continue to operate. So in the world, in the way the industry has gone up and how cyber breaches are happening right now, as I said before, the philosophy is you will be breached whether you know it or don't know it. So you have to make sure that you defend yourself properly. So you have to be in a mindset and in a state to understand that you could be under attack or that you could be under a breach scenario, but you need to continue to run operations because that is the bane of existence of any organization, to make money, for stakeholder engagement, for shareholder value. So cyber resilience is important, and I think we need to shift our mindset from, as I said before, from prevention to understanding. Can we continue to be resilient in the face of attacks happening in our organization? There are many ways you can cover that from various different philosophies, but I would give cyber resilience a 4 for that matter.
4, no 5s yet.
No 5s yet, yes, because for 5, I would say you are the best of the breed, or there's nothing more you can, in my opinion, you can't improve further. And I think in this world, there's nothing you can't improve further.
Okay.
So
maybe I'll change that next time to 1 to 10. I can get to 9 maybe.
That actually brings me to my my instructor days as well. When I score my students, I generally don't give them full marks. They always have scope for improvement.
Prashant, I was reading an article by Victor Ronin in medium.com about the word hacker and how it's changing its meaning over the last few years, from coder to cybercriminal to ethical hacker. In your B-Sides presentation last year, you appealed to the audience not to become hackers. I presume this was not to become cybercriminals.
That is correct, Alex. So in fact, I'm a little bit of a philosophical mindset when it comes to cybersecurity as well, and I've read some books as well of the past. So in my opinion, a hacker definitely does not mean a hacker with a criminal mindset. In my opinion, that would be something that would be called a cracker or a freaker or a black hat person, if you call it that way. There's in fact a very good article called the Hacker's Manifesto on the internet. You could probably Google that. It's given by one of the famous hackers. I don't recall his name at this point in time, but the Hacker's Manifesto is the mindset of hacking. And in my opinion, hacking, as it used to be in the past, is about the inquisitiveness and the passion to break things or to look for things and understand technology and those things. And in the process of doing that, if you find flaws or vulnerabilities as a hacker, you do an informed disclosure to the party who owns that technology or that piece of code. And so a hacker is the ones who actually, take that step further in the world and help improve technology to take that leap into the future. That word got mixed and matched by the media over a long period of time, where they thought hackers are bad people, and then kind of moved into the freaking, cracking, and the black hat community of folks who we think now are criminal-minded. But in my opinion, still hackers are diehard, passionate people who like to learn technology and to make, put a step further into the progress in the industry.
And perhaps want to help organizations close their back doors so that they don't get breached.
Absolutely.
And so that clients don't suffer.
Informed disclosure, so they're not using those vulnerabilities for bad reasons or for bad means. They discover those vulnerabilities and then they share it with those organizations and even options to go fix those issues. And there have been many cases in the industry even now where these so-called hackers, good hackers if you will, they find these flaws and then they do these informed disclosures, like bug bounty programs are an example where even companies pay some of these hackers to tell them what is vulnerable in their core and on their technology systems.
I remember listening to Alyssa Knight at B-Sides Edmonton last year. She said she did an informed disclosure. The company said that they had closed the back door, and she checked a little while later and they had not.
Correct. So this is where I also subscribe to another school of thought that if after making all your due diligence steps as a hacker of informed disclosure to the company and it is still not being solved, then I think you have the moral right to disclose it publicly. In the event to bring attention to the fact that it is important that some of those technologies can be fixed. I'll give you an example. Like in the OT cyber world or in the ICS cyber world in US, there is a big organization called CISA, Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency. And it is an organization which is a clearinghouse of many of these vulnerabilities and these hacking disclosures by hackers in the world in the ICS space. Now, they have a little bit of wherewithal and clout with the vendors in case the hackers directly talk to the vendors or do informed disclosure and they don't get that fixed, then they can go through the CISA as an organization, and they have the US government's backing to make sure that those vendors look at it a little bit more carefully and fix those issues. But they're doing a good job for the industry. You know, in cybersecurity, it is important to know that we need to share because we have to be right every time. The bad guys have to be right only once.
Absolutely. Prashant, being a cybersecurity advisor and being paid to advise, do you find in general that the people paying you act on your advice?
The short answer is yes. The long answer, I would say, depends on how you propose that advice and how you build those stakeholder engagements and how you bring that risk management methodology and concept into the real world in normal and easy language for those stakeholders to understand. We as cyber advisors or cybersecurity in general are paid to understand cybersecurity issues, their flaws, and the recommendations there too. But I'm always of the opinion that cybersecurity risks, as advisors, we are the ones who can advise on. The owners of the risks would be in the business who need to understand that and need to act upon those. It's how you get that message. I think the world has moved from the philosophy of FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, into the philosophy of doing risk management, where you provide the risk, their ratings, maybe quantify them or qualify them, and then provide recommendations to those business owners and risk owners to understand, whether from a cost perspective, whether from a technical perspective, for them to make informed decisions and going forward.
Right. So what advice can you give, going back to the beginning, and thinking about Abibasi again, what advice could you give people who are about to start their career in cybersecurity around training or hands-on or qualifications?
Try to put it into simple words. As an instructor, I've seen students who would like to come up in this field and would like to expand further their knowledge and look for the job, to be honest, in this industry. So the advice I would give is, one is, you got to find your passion in this field if you are in this field. Make sure that you can live your life and make your living being in this field. If you can, then you need to go back to the basic principles and find out, are you in the right field? When a work becomes your passion, then it's not work anymore. Then you come to work every day with more commitment and more motivation to contribute to this field. So that is one. Make sure that you're passionate about the field. Number two, find good mentors in this field. You can't learn everything. You need to have good mentors who can tell you what to do, how to do, who have already proven themselves or have gone through the motions of this in their own industry, in their own life. Number three, yes, I think you need to move from the world of concepts, which are important, to the world of hands-on. And there are many ways as students, whether in different universities or colleges, you can become hands-on. I mean, the world is a virtualization world right now. You can have good machines to run virtualization software and play with virtual machines and work.
Safer way to do it. Experiment.
Absolutely. And number four is, I mean, there's a lot of free resources on the net, on the internet to look forward to, and even within cybersecurity, such a varied field, you need to find what your passion is. And within that as well, like there is threat intelligence, there is vulnerability management, risk management, governance, risk and compliance, security operations, right? So you have to find your niche and work on that. Now, being a student and going into the industry, first off, you may not be able to get an opportunity to work in your niche within cyber. So if you get an opportunity to work, let's say even in IT as an IT support analyst, start from there and find ways how you can move over into cyber. If you are fortunate enough to get your start within cyber as an analyst, all good. So learn different aspects of the industry and the discipline, and then figure out where your niche is. You know, there are two philosophies: jack of all trades or master of one. I always believe in master of one. If you know your technology and your niche inside out, there will always be value for you in the industry to get into.
I think that aligns quite nicely with the podcast I was listening to from InfoSec with Keytron. He was talking about being able to just find an area close to where you'd like to be and then finding and feeling your way around that area and moving towards what you'd like to do. Nobody, I think, in this day and age can ever expect to start in an area that they find is the best for them and stay there.
Absolutely, yeah. I teach also some certification courses. So like CISSP, as they call it, which we all call it the gold standard of cybersecurity, which I would definitely recommend anybody to take on for sure. But they call it an inch deep and mile wide certification. Right. So it is inch deep as it'll give you a flavor of every different sections within cybersecurity discipline, but it'll be a mile wide. It'll give you the whole gamut of what you need to do. So that is in a start. You got to understand what all are there, but maybe as you go along in your career, make sure that you at least understand one piece of that discipline pretty well. To start the basics, I would say start with CISSP. Again, it needs 5 years experience and whatnot, so you can actually look into the requirements for that. I mean, if it is literally you are totally new into the field, then there are other certifications like CEH, like SSCP, which could give you a good start before you can jump into more advanced certifications like CISSP or CCSP. And
will give you a micro-credential which could be valuable for getting accepted as a candidate at a job interview.
Absolutely. This is another thing I should actually harp on a little bit. So there is this philosophical debate in the industry whether experience is good enough or certifications or education are good enough. I am of the philosophy that actually you need to have a middle ground between the two. So experience will come on its own when you're in the industry and you continue to be engaged and employed. While you can certify yourself, and then as experience grows on, then you are providing the best of the certification, the education knowledge, as well as the experience in the industry. So I'm not of the opinion of either or. I would rather say it's a mix and blend of both, where you need to certify on certain good certifications and also make sure you get experience as you go along on this.
Certify to show that you understand what you're talking about, and then hands-on proves that you know what you're talking about.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Prashant. It's been great speaking with you. Prashant could be a future CISO, and he could certainly make fun of cybersecurity in my organisation. You now know a bit more about cybersecurity from a corporate advisor's perspective. I'll be back in a week or so with the fourth and final minus bonus episode in this series with a security storage and software specialist and colleague at IBM.